Ooh. Oh yeah, that's the daddy maker right there. So you want to buy a used motorcycle online? Well, you've come to the right place. Buying a used motorcycle private party on places like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace can be really intimidating if you've never done it before. Most people buy their motorcycles from dealerships because they don't know a ton about motorcycles, which is okay, but you can get a really good deal on a used bike. You just have to know what to look for. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Olivia, and today I'm going to be walking you through the entire process of how to contact somebody on Craigslist or Facebook, to actually going to look at the motorcycle, what to look for, and then how to make the deal so that you can ride home on your new to you bike without any worries. I am a trained mechanic. I've worked at used bike dealerships where it was my job to literally inspect bikes as they came in and find all the things that was wrong with them. So I want to share all this information and give you the confidence to do this yourself. Some of the information I'm going to go over in this video may seem silly or redundant for those of you who have used Craigslist or Marketplace before, but for someone who has never been on these websites, I want to cover all that I can so that there's no surprises and the process is really clear. So let's say that you found a motorcycle that you really like, you feel that you're going to get a good deal on it, they're not asking too much, and from what you've read in the description, it seems like it's the right bike for you. I would like to make a note, please read the description and reread it, whether it's on Facebook or on Craigslist. A question you may have may already be answered, and if you ask a question that is already answered in somebody's ad, it can be really frustrating for the seller because it makes them feel like you didn't actually read the ad. When you're on Craigslist's website, there's going to be a reply button at the top of the page, and when you click that, it can have the seller's information, such as their phone number, whether they prefer a call or a text. Sometimes they'll put that in the description, or an email. Depending on the person, some people do prefer to go through email, other people just prefer text. I personally like calling somebody because talking to a real person makes me feel like I'm not getting scammed. So how you choose to contact them on Craigslist is totally up to you and how comfortable you feel. Facebook Marketplace makes this really easy because you contact them directly through Messenger. There's no exchange of emails or phone numbers. Regardless of which platform you're using, you want to make sure that you are getting straight to the point and being straightforward in your messages. If you send a message to somebody asking if it's still available, and then in the ad, in their first line, they say that if this ad is up, the bike is still available, don't be surprised if the seller ignores you. You're more than likely not the only person contacting them about the bike, and what they're more likely to respond to is somebody who says that they have the money, they're ready to buy it, and trying to figure out when the seller's available to go look at the bike. The message I usually like to send or receive as a seller is, "Hi, my name is Olivia. I have cash in hand. I'm very interested in this bike. I'm available at this time to come pick up, or these days to come pick up. When are you available next? I would love to come see the bike. Thank you so much." You may have some questions about the bike. I typically reserve those for when I'm actually seeing the bike. Bikes can come and go so fast on Facebook Marketplace, and if it's a good deal, there's even more likely that you're not the only or first person to contact them. When they see a message like that, as opposed to, "Hey, is this still available?" they're more likely to reply to that person saying, "Yeah, hey, come over at this time, I'm also available." They know that you are more eager to get it. When it comes to actually meeting up with the person to see the bike, it is very common to actually go to the person's house to buy the motorcycle. If that makes you really uncomfortable, don't be afraid to ask them if they'd be willing to meet in a public place. I typically will bring someone with me when I go to look at a motorcycle, whether it's a friend or family member, not only as a ride so that I can actually buy the bike and ride it home, but so that I'm not alone. So you've contacted the person, you've set up a time to go look at the motorcycle. Now what? Time to suss out the motorcycle. Having bought and sold used motorcycles over the last couple of years, and having worked in a used bike dealership, I want to let you guys in on all the little secrets that things get swept under the rug when a bike is being sold. These are all the things that you're gonna miss when you're looking at a bike, and it's gonna cost you. I'm gonna be using my Suzuki Bandit as an example, and my Harley Davidson Dyna to give you guys the best of both worlds, because cruisers and sport bikes are a little bit different. A lot of this will also apply to dirt bikes, so we're really gonna break it down. You do not need a mechanic to go look at a bike for you. you got your girl. Let's get looking. So the first thing you want to check when you're looking at a used bike is, does it start? Turn the key, does it turn on? When you get to the bike, is it already hot? Is the engine hot? Are the pipes hot? Did they run this bike before you got there? I would be wary if a motorcycle's already been warmed up before you come to look at it. Sometimes a warm engine can hide problems or noises that happen when the engine is cold. So as a mechanic, it's important to me to hear the bike on a cold start. Before you start it up, you want to make sure you got the key, first of all, that it slides into the ignition easily, and that you turn it on, everything lights up. It's the perfect opportunity to make sure all of the electronics are working, meaning your turn signals, your horn, the high beam. Get behind the bike. Is the tail light working? When you pull on the brake lever, does the brake light come on? Same with the rear brake pedal. When you press it, does the brake light come on? Pull on the clutch and the brake lever and make sure that you have working brakes. Something that gets overlooked way more often than it should is your throttle. Does the throttle have a little bit of play in it? And as you turn the handlebars left to right, how is that play? Does it tighten up? If when you turn the handlebars and it starts to pull on the throttle, you have incorrect play, and this is very dangerous. You want to make sure when you pull the throttle all the way open that it snaps back. This is the #1 issue I saw on a lot of dirt bikes and sport bikes. People would often put bar ends or the bar end mirrors without ever checking the clearance of the rubber grip to the bar end. And so when they'd open the throttle, it would stick. And as they let go, that throttle would stay open. Now, it's something that's very easy to remedy, but before you ride off on your next bike, definitely check that throttle play. The gas tank. Seems pretty obvious, right? But you want to look around it, smell around it, and make sure that it's not leaking. When I bought this bike, I noticed that everything underneath the gas tank was really dirty. What I did not realize is that this tank had a hairline fracture and was slowly dripping fuel out as everything else collected dirt and dust and grime. And while things like that can get past even the most eagle eyes like myself, learn from my mistakes and check all around the gas tank. Now, the thing that gets overlooked probably the most is somebody actually looking inside the gas tank. Yeah, when was the last time you actually looked inside of a gas tank before you bought a bike? Chances are not super often, and it's why having a flashlight is extremely important. Not only can you look around all the dark corners of the motorcycle, but you can get a real good look inside that gas tank and look for rust. Sometimes you can get away with a little bit of rust, depending on the age of the bike. A lot of my gas tanks had a tiny bit of rust in them. But a lot of rust is where you're gonna have problems, especially with older motorcycles. No, it is not the easiest thing to deal with, so it's something to look out for and make sure you avoid. While we're still at the front of the bike, you want to check and make sure all of the cables, wires, all of your throttle cables, everything is flowing, that especially they're not all zip tied together, and that turning the bike's handlebars from left to right is pretty easy. Look at the bars and the way that the wheel and the triple tree and your forks, the way everything looks, make sure that it looks straight. People can easily drop a bike, making the handlebars bend. And all I have to do is replace some grips or bar ends, and it'll look like nothing ever happened. A lot of handlebars are made out of aluminum, which is really easy to bend at a standstill drop. When you're going to look at a bike, you're kind of nervous and you're excited about potentially getting it. That's just something that does get overlooked, and I myself have overlooked. Now that you've made sure that all your switches, buttons are working, levers, brake pedals, lights, handlebars are straight, and the tank looks good, we're gonna start working our way top to bottom, front to back. Fork seals. What are they and why are they important? Well, their name implies all you need to know. This is your fork leg, and they seal the oil inside of the fork tube. I've seen a lot of motorcycles sold with blown out fork seals, and the reason it gets overlooked is because the seller just cleans the area up, wipes it down really good, and you, the poor schmuck, comes along without knowing anything about fork seals and buys it and rides with it. And within a week or two, you notice that you are covered in grime and oil and gunk, and it's seeping all out of your fork seal. One of the most obvious telltale signs is obviously going to be oil around here, but more likely than not, it's usually a slow seep, and so you're just gonna get a lot of black gunk and grime that surrounds this area. It's dangerous because that fork oil can make it all the way down onto your front brake caliper, which can make it onto your brakes, and oil plus brakes are bad. It can be even more deceptive if they have those cute little fork boots over the area so that you're not even looking at it. You have to pry them up in order to look at it. This is very important. In order to check this, all you have to do is stand the bike up, hold that front brake so that it doesn't roll, and you're gonna wanna put pressure and push down to compress the forks. Do this quite a few times. Make sure that the forks are actually working and that the spring is pushing it back up. But what you're gonna be looking for is to make sure that there's no rings of oil that are appearing on the fork leg. If you start to see oil and dirt and grime and all kinds of stuff, there's your sign. So moving down from the fork seals, we want to make sure that the brake caliper is in pretty good condition. You want to try and move it around, make sure it's not loose and that both of the bolts that are holding it in should be there. Same with the fork fluid, you want to make sure that there's no brake fluid around the area. Check your rotor too and make sure that it's not all deeply scored and that everything feels nice and solid. Most people just kind of glance at the tire and make sure there's no big cracks, there's no plugs in it. Actually, most people just make sure that there's tread and they don't go much farther than that. Besides checking for all those things, you want to take a look on the side wall of the tire. Not only will it tell you what kind of tire it is, but it's going to give you a manufacturer's date. There's going to be a 4-digit code on there that will tell you the week and the year it was made. This tire was made in the 45th week of 2020. A tire that's 5 years or older is something that you're going to want to replace. Even 8, 9, or 10 years, I wouldn't even ride on a tire that old. You're really taking your chances because as the rubber ages, it gets really hard, and hard old tires means it's not going to stick to the road. Now, this may not be a deal breaker for you, but it is a good negotiating point. If you're trying to trim a little bit off of their asking price and the tires are really old or kind of bald, or maybe even you can see the weather cracking in between the tread, I would definitely use this to get yourself a better price. This isn't as big of an issue with most street bikes, but I do see it sometimes. I see it a lot on dirt bikes, is that you're gonna have a bent rim. It doesn't take much to spot a bend in a rim, but if you're not looking for it, you could totally overlook it. There are some places that claim to repair bent motorcycle rims, but personally, I have seen the inside of a bent motorcycle rim when I bent my motorcycle rim from hitting a big rock on the freeway. When I pulled the tire off of that rim, the inside was cracked. So it may be tempting to just hammer that bend right back in, but there is damage there you may not be able to see from the outside. So just be wary. Now for the more in-depth, harder big part you may not understand, the engine. Is it a V-twin? Is it a parallel twin? Is it a 4-cylinder? Is it a 6-cylinder? Is it an 8-cylinder? Who knows how many cylinders are in there? Not knowing what every little thing on a motorcycle is okay. What's important is that you know what to look for so that you can avoid problems. All engines are pretty much the same. They're gonna have some sort of oil in it, or possibly coolant if it's liquid cooled. It may be oil cooled, and like this Bandit, have an oil cooler on the front that does a similar thing as a radiator. Regardless of all that, this means there are fluids inside that can leak out. So starting from top to bottom, you want to take a good look at the entire engine and see if there's any dirt or grime buildup, because those are typically indicative of an oil leak. Now, if you're buying a sport bike or a bike that's covered in fairings and such, plastics, it's going to be a lot harder to spot these things. This is why I absolutely recommend bringing a flashlight or some sort of small spotlight that you can take a look on the inside and try and spot any leaks. Take a look around at the drain plugs, at the bottom of the oil pan of the engine, just anywhere where there's some seams where there could possibly be oil leaking out of. What you're looking for is a dry surface. It can be dusty and dirty, but as long as it's not got that wet, grimy look, you are totally okay. While you're looking around the engine, you'll be able to spot the oil sight glass or the dipstick, whatever kind of bike it is. Make sure the oil is at the right level and that the color is good. Depending on what kind of oil they use in the bike, it could be any color from a light golden color to a dark brown color. What you want to avoid is black or gray, as that is indicative that something is either wrong or it has not been changed in far too long. Speaking of fluids, brake fluids. Can you spot the rear brake reservoir? Well, it would be even harder to spot because normally there's a cover here. This is the rear brake reservoir, and sometimes there's only a small window to take a look at it, especially on sport bikes or sport touring bikes and such. It's where you want to take your flashlight. Typically, the brake reservoir is clear so that you can see the fluid on the inside, and you can see, as I put the light up to it, it's got a nice little golden color. That's exactly what you want, depending on what brand of brake fluid they use. It could be this sort of golden color. It could be completely clear. What you want to avoid is that dark brown, yucky, murky color. And also checking on that level of fluid that's on the inside. If the brake fluid is all the way down at the bottom, check the brake pads, because typically what that means is that the brake pads have worn all the way down, and so now the fluid's making up for it and it's starting to go down. You'll do the same for the front brake reservoir as well. You want to check. You can usually see that one a little bit easier. There's usually a little window on it. So looking at our back side, we're gonna pretty much do the same thing we did in the front. It's gonna be checking your rim, making sure there's no dents, taking a look at your brake caliper, making sure that there's no fluid coming out of it. It's on there solidly and things look all tight. If you take your flashlight and look down inside here, I'm gonna get closer. So coming down in here, you would be able to look at the brake pads. When it comes to the chain, you want about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. It's pretty standard with the amount of slack. Look at the chain itself and take note. Is it really dirty and grimy? What's the condition? Is it super rusty and dry? If it's an O-ring chain, those small O-ring seals can deteriorate and start to pop out. When you go to move the chain, make sure that it's not super stiff, it doesn't have any kinks in it. Those are all things that show that the chain should probably be changed out. Now, belt tension is gonna be a little bit different than chain slack. On most Harleys and on a lot of cruisers, these are gonna be covered with guards really well so that rocks and debris don't pop in there, because getting a rock in your belt can cause a lot of damage. So it's a little bit harder to see, but you definitely want to try and get in there and see as much of the belt as you can. And what you're looking for is the teeth, making sure that there's no chips missing out of the teeth, or sometimes they can start to split. The belt itself will start to split. Typically belts do have a longer wear life. I'm more worried about checking a chain as opposed to checking a belt, but I have seen damaged belts come into the shop, so much so that the belt does have to be replaced. So it is something worth checking, because a lot of times changing out that belt can be a very expensive job for a shop. Just as an example with this Dyna, if I needed to change out this belt, this entire primary case, cover and back and all would have to come off in order to get to where I could put on the new belt onto that front pulley. So it is totally worth getting down underneath the bike and taking a look. Once you've fully gone over the bike, now it's time to actually ride it. In most cases, the seller's gonna let you ride the bike. It only makes sense. Sometimes the seller won't want you to actually ride it and they will take it for a ride. This is your opportunity to listen to it at startup and listen to it riding up and down the street, listening for any strange noises, ticking, knocking, things like that. And I know what you're saying, Olivia, I don't know how an engine is supposed to sound. How do I know if anything's wrong with it? This is where the beauty of YouTube comes in. Whenever I would go check out a motorcycle that I'd never actually heard or seen in person before, I would always research the year, make, and model on YouTube. You'd be surprised how many people upload videos of a walk around and a start up and the bike just going up and down in the first couple of gears. Bless those people, because it kind of gives you an idea of exactly how the bike should sound. While you're doing your research, do take note on whether the bike is fuel injected or carbureted. Some carbureted bikes can tend to be a little bit cold-blooded and they may have a choke and they may sound a little bit rough until they get warmed up. But don't take that as an excuse as to the bike having a really rough start. This bike is carbureted and it probably takes about 1 minute to 2 minutes to warm up. That's an adequate amount of time for me to be able to get on the bike, turn off the choke, and take off without the bike dying. If you start up a bike and it warms up for a few minutes and still doesn't quite want to run off of the choke, or if you give it throttle and it starts to die, it's probably been sitting for a while and it's gonna need some service. Now, I'm not gonna go too deep down that rabbit hole, but this is just something to keep in mind. When you test ride the bike, what you're making sure of is that both the front and rear brakes work well, and always do that before you take off. Make sure on your ride that you're doing both left and right turns, checking to see that there's no strange notchiness. Ideally, get the bike up to speed, shift it through all of its gears. What you're looking for is smooth operation. If you're experiencing any jittering, shuddering, shaking, pogoing, or unevenness in your ride, that is a big red flag that there is something wrong. So overall, take your time. Bring a friend with you, even if it's just to have backup. Have a second set of eyes to look over the bike with you. They may not know exactly what they're looking at. You can send them this video so they know what to look for. Just in case you miss something, your friend might be able to catch it for you. All right, well, let's say the bike looks good, it sounds good, maybe it's got something wrong, like it just needs some new tires, but everything else checks out and you are ready to throw cash. Let's talk wheeling and dealing. The final exchange of money. What you offer someone for their motorcycle is going to be close to what they're asking, and also probably the reason you went to see it in the first place is because it's within your budget. When you want to negotiate with someone, that's going to require some research on your part. So while you're looking up those videos on YouTube of how the motorcycle actually sounds at startup, you can also look up the value of the motorcycle. You can look up the NADA guide or Kelly Blue Book. Knowing what the bike is valued at and also what the bike is currently selling at is a great advantage for you for negotiating, but do keep in mind sometimes a seller is just set on their price and what they're asking is really what they want. I'd say for the most part, people are not too unreasonable, and if you did your due diligence of fully looking over the motorcycle, if there was anything wrong with it, you can bring that up when negotiating the price, and I would definitely do that. Negotiate a price, make an offer. Remember that the worst they can say is no. People will often list their motorcycles for more than what they're actually worth because they're hoping that someone's going to make an offer for what they actually want to get for it. So if you see a bike listed for $5,000, chances are they may only want $4,000 or $4,500 for it. Now don't go making super ridiculous lowball offers. If somebody wants $5,000 for their bike and you come up saying, oh, well, you take $2,000 or $3,000, that's just ridiculous and it's kind of insulting. Now, once a seller accepts your offer, before you hand them that cash, you want to take a look at all the paperwork. If you live in California, it's an absolute disaster of paperwork sometimes. So in California, you have to register a bike every single year and pay that registration to get your new yearly tag. Now, if everything looks good with the bike, let's say it has a clean title, it's in their name, they're ready to sign it over to you, but the registration's not up to date. Maybe they say it's non-op. Non-op means that the bike is registered as non-operational. It is not legally registered to be ridden on the street. So what that person did was pay a much smaller fee, told the DMV, hey, I own this bike, but I'm not operating it. And so they don't have to pay the registration. They don't get the sticker every year. And when you go to register that bike, you don't have to pay for all of the years that it was not registered. In California, if you don't register that bike as non-op and don't pay the regular registration fee, it creates what is called back fees. And California wants their money. So when you buy this motorcycle that hasn't been registered in 5 years, you get to pay all 5 years of that wonderful back registration. It just makes me feel all fuzzy inside. So what may have been $100 to $150 on title transfer and taxes on actually buying the bike from a private party, and then all the other small fees California likes to tack on, now we have this great big back registration fee of $600. Now that wonderful $3,000 bike deal that you got has just become almost $4,000 with whatever else you got to do to the bike. This is why I left this for last, because it's probably the most boring part about buying the bike. Nobody wants to think about paperwork, no one wants to think about registration and title transfer, but these are the things that you have to consider. When someone doesn't have the title or they don't have any of the registration paperwork, that is a huge red flag. And if you do buy the bike, sorry, you are gambling with taking on those fees. Now, people can argue that there's ways around it, there's paperwork you can fill out, and I have tried to work the system myself. It's way more of a headache than just waiting for the right deal to come around with someone who has all of their paperwork straight so that it's just an easy deal. So again, make sure they have the title, it's actually in their name, so that when they sign off on it, they're the ones signing over the motorcycle to you. You'll usually want to have a bill of sale. Sometimes I'll print it out from the internet. There's already plenty of ready-made ones, some even from the DMV website, or you can just write up your own, which is what I typically do. So, pat yourself on the back. You just got a title that you're going to take to the DMV and transfer into your name. You handed them over a wad of cash, and you got the keys to a new-to-you motorcycle. Well, hopefully you guys stuck with me through this whole video, and I hope that this video helped you. If you're somebody who wants to hop on Facebook Marketplace or Old Boomer Craigslist, find yourself a used motorcycle and pick it up for far cheaper than what you would get it at a dealership. In this day and age, it pays to be thrifty. I want money in the bank and gas in the tank, baby. doesn't mean I can't have motorcycles in the garage too. Now I know I'm not the only avid motorcyclist on here who likes to buy used motorcycles from Facebook Marketplace and such, so if there's anything that I missed, any tips or tricks that you would like to give somebody buying their first used motorcycle from a private party, leave it in the comments down below. So go forth, brave buyer! Get yourself a used bike. Don't be afraid to talk to strangers on the internet. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. So support this channel for absolutely free. You can like this video and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment. Maybe share this video with somebody who's thinking about buying a used motorcycle. You want to give me that super spicy love? You can head down in the description. I have a link to my Patreon. It's $1 a month. You're helping me out. I will love you forever. We can be best friends, but not best friends. You don't have to. You can just like the video. I mean, the least you can do is just click the like button. Otherwise, this is just free information and releasing out into the world. Free, helpful information for you. Like a library, baby. Subscribed. Get your Kill Switch Queen card. Come on back now. See you in the next video.